And we're live. I'm here with, we're not live, it's actually pre-recorded. I'm here with Colby. Colby, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Caleb?
I'm doing good. Happy to be recording with you again.
I noticed that you're still Faith, Liberty, and Praxis as the title of the show.
I know. I got a new name, but once I get the new intro made, I'm gonna make the announcement post and put the new intro up and kind of change the aesthetics. I just gotta, trying to get in, like, knowing the scene of the episode, trying to make an intro around that is difficult. And so I'll figure it out eventually.
Well, good.
But yeah, so you've been on before, but last time you were on, you didn't have a podcast. Now you do. So go ahead and just tell the audience who you are, what you do, and about your podcast.
Right. I am Colby Mitchell. I can call myself a Catholic apologist, not because I have the podcast, because I do it in real life. So apologist is a person who teaches the defense of a school of thought or a philosophy or a theology. For me, I defend the Catholic faith. So I have a podcast geared around that called The Pious, the Pig, and the Podcast that I do with my friend Davis. He is a Catholic. He and I went to the same parish growing up. And he has been a much more mellow, lax Catholic over the last many years, but has been kind of revamping it. Not that he ever just left the church altogether. It's just, I got better things to do on Sunday, that kind of stuff. So he's trying to get more and more into what we do, why we do it. So that was the whole purpose of the podcast in the first place, was me and him to just be able to chat around that. Then we, after having a few conversations, realized, hey, there's some other people that would like to hear this. Well, we might as well record it and put it up as a podcast, and have had a pretty good response to it. It's almost like a Catholic 101 type podcast to teach you just the basics, why we do some of the stuff, where it differs from, what you normally see, and hopefully inspires people to go back to Mass and go back to confession or check into it in the first place.
It's a great podcast. I enjoy it. I've sent it to a few friends of mine who are either starting RCIA or looking into the Catholic Church. And I'm like, I usually send them a Grant and Jamie's podcast, but I've come to the conclusion that's maybe a little too aggressive for some newbies.
It's very deep. It's very deep. Because it's also the difference between our podcast and Contra Gentilis is they really focus on what is good and what is beautiful and what is true, which is great. To get to that level of thought that they go into, you need to have some parameters to think through that thought. Like you have to get to the starting line before you can start running the race. Yeah. And it's going to confuse people if they don't have the necessary tools that they're needing to work with. So that's what my goal is to give you those tools to help you forge it on your own and get to your own conclusions from there. I'm not beating you over the head and making you become Catholic, but I want to give you every opportunity to learn and understand. Because one thing I've figured out a lot as being a Southerner living in a Protestant-dominated society, a lot of the disagreements that Christians have with each other, a lot of it comes down to we don't agree on our terms. We don't know.
Absolutely.
We're speaking two different languages. We don't know what we mean. Something as simple as the word worship. That means something completely different to a Protestant and a Catholic.
Yeah, it means prayer, most likely.
Yeah, that for a Catholic, it's a very specific thing. It involves the sacraments. It involves the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And it doesn't necessarily, prayer's incorporated into it, but that's not what it is. Prayer is not equating worship. Singing a song, giving a praise, that praise and worship are two different things. Whenever you're in a Protestant youth group, you often hear those lumped together, praise and worship. It means we're going to go sing a song that glorifies God, which is a good thing, but it is not the same thing that Catholics are doing. So that's why when, they hear us praying a rosary or asking for a saint's intercession, they're sitting there going, oh my gosh, they're worshiping the saints. They're worshiping Mary, where no, I mean, in their mind, it probably is. Yes, we are worshiping Mary because prayer equates worship in a lot of cases, but that's not we don't agree on our terms. And I've seen people get furious yelling at each other when they're speaking two different languages. So it's one thing I'm trying to guide along, and I've been so deep into it as far as from an apologist standpoint. I have immersed myself in a Catholic culture up in Denver where I didn't really meet a bunch of Protestants. It was either hardcore Catholics or agnostics, people who just didn't care. That I've kind of lost some of that, hey, what's weird, what's not weird. So Davis helps me guide along that. And if he's the one who gets tripped up and says, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And that's how we kind of rock the boat and go forward in that podcast, is him asking the questions that I haven't even thought about in 10, 15 years of doing this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's definitely something that's kind of especially going like you being Catholic in a very Protestant community or Protestant area. It's odd, and I didn't realize how odd it was until I became more and more Catholic, and I just realized how much there's so many little sayings, like I've been saying. I was talking to a Protestant. It was like a group of an old friend of mine from church. So it's like a Christmas party, and I went there with all my old Protestant church friends, and talking about prayer. How I try to pray daily. I'm like, yeah. So I said I try to pray the rosary daily. And it was a weird. We're like, well, that's not what we mean. I'm like, well, it is. You just don't. It was very trying to talking to like 5 people at once and trying to get them all to say, no. I'm using the word differently, and I need to understand why my word is correct. Right. My definition is, ontologically true. The moment you say the word ontologically, a lot of them just check out.
Right. Because and that's why you can't send them straight to Grant and Jeremy, because that's where you're going to get too far.
They're much more about dragging you to it than leading you to it, which I can appreciate because some people need to be dragged.
Yeah.
But I'm not the guy for that.
Right. Well, and it's Protestantism is not completely untrue. Obviously, they're still, worship Christ. They still are striving for the same things we are, and we have a lot we could learn from Protestants. That's one thing that I always get caught up in. I've kept my devotions or the liturgy of the hours, and I've been praying the rosary daily since the beginning of last year. But if you're doing those two things, keeping your devotions, keeping the wheels running, that's a good thing. You should continue to do those things. But how often do I stop and do some meditative, contemplative prayer where I'm letting God speak to me? Because it's really just okay, I'm praying the Psalms. Okay, I'm reciting my Hail Marys. That's all good. But am I giving God a chance to speak to me? And he might sneak it into the scriptures, but I've put him in a box there at that point of, here's your only chance to get to talk to me. Whereas Protestants, their entire time might not necessarily be contemplative, but it is a conversation. It is talking to, their brother Christ. That is not something that we do often, because one thing, it is frightening to sometimes do it. Typically want to contain that just to right before you go to confession, go, okay, God, where have I screwed up? But whenever you start to quiet yourself and to open up your heart and open up your mind and say, okay, God, I'm letting you in, scary things start to happen at that point. That's when he starts talking to you. And Catholics don't love that, because it usually means you got to make a change. You got to make a sacrifice. Something is going to happen that's going to put you out of your comfort zone. And as Pope Benedict, the late Pope Benedict, always said, you were not made for comfort. The world offers you comfort. You were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. So that's one thing, the Catholics who do open themselves up to that point where they can let God in, that's a point where they become great men. They become saints. I've been noticing a lot, especially just even here locally in Mississippi, all of the major or disproportionate amount of the business owners, disproportionate amount of the politicians, the people in the state house are Catholic. We're 1.7% of the population in Mississippi, yet we make up like 30% of the state house. If you're going down the street and see the billboards, I can go, oh, they go to St. Richard. Oh, they go to St. Paul. Oh, they go to St. Jude. I can just see them all there. And it's because Catholics have additional tools that help them build themselves up. And it's not this is not a prosperity gospel type message. It's just hey, God, what are you calling me to? And I'll listen.
This is something William Lane Craig said maybe a year or two back. He was talking. Someone asked him, like, what do you like about Catholics? And he said that Catholics are, like, most lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers who are Catholic. Most of the Supreme Court is Catholic. A lot of politicians are Catholic. Protestants' parents tell their kids to go be a preacher or a missionary, and Catholics are just like, you should probably find a job that's good for you. And he definitely appreciated that. I think that's definitely a point that's. I mean, I've seen a lot of, like, right-wing Protestants on Twitter talk about the disproportionate influence Catholics have over politics compared to Protestants, considering the numbers. And it is odd to kind of notice that, where it's kind of like, okay, there's a surprising number of Catholic politicians in President Biden, for example, not a great example, but still an example. Ron DeSantis, another example. And I think one thing that leads to that is for lack of a better word, the legalism. That has a negative connotation, but I don't think it's necessarily negative. Of the church leads to people having a better sense of, government structures and that kind of stuff, kind of just getting us intuiting how to operate in those fields,
Well, it also helps because one of the things that's different if you go to look at a Catholic country or Catholic originated country like Ireland versus a Protestant country looking at like England, whereas the laws are much more, when it comes to judgment time, spirit of the law versus letter of the law, where the Protestants are going to be very, hey, you've got to do things exactly the way you're supposed to do it by the book. And the Catholics go, okay, what's the intent? Intent matters a lot in the Catholic philosophy and the Catholic thought. So that's one thing that helps politicians, is especially in the Catholic world. Now, a lot of the Catholic politicians that they're still baptized Catholics, they use it for evil a lot of the time, but they understand how the world works a little better and how the game works a little better. So even if you're a lapsed Catholic and still a Catholic in the Congress, how human nature works. That you're not bound to the steadfast rules. You can, make sure your intent is in the right place. And that's how some people I guarantee there's people in Congress that we look and we go, I hate that they have the Catholic name, but they figured it out in their mind where they're the good guy.
Yeah.
And that they think they're honoring God. They think they're doing what's right. And it's because they've, let themselves become their own pope a little bit and say, this is what's right and this is what's wrong in the long run. You could twist the words and easily justify voting for widespread abortion.
I saw Nancy Pelosi. She used Augustine and Aquinas to justify abortion.
Right. And to even just to give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she truly believes that, and that she can go, okay, I'm very compassionate and have a big heart towards these mothers that the dads are going to leave and whatever, or they are scared and they might die and stuff like that. That can easily be made into a valid argument. They still, if they were a practicing Catholic and in good standing with the church, they would still submit to their bishops who are telling them, no, you can't do that. Because that's the big thing about us as lay people. We're not in charge of those decisions.
Yeah.
We are asked to, or we're told to shut our mouths and rely on our bishops and the Pope and our spiritual fathers here on earth. A lot of Catholics don't do that. I myself have trouble submitting to my bishop and to my priest and the spiritual fathers in my life, but that's what I have to do. That's I'm thankful that the people listening to my podcast, I know there's at least 2 priests. I think my pastor and another one who's a young priest in South Mississippi that listens to my podcast that I know will correct me if I make a mistake.
I hope my priest never finds out about my podcast. I never will. No one in my parents should ever know what I do for fun. And no one needs to know this. Now, I would say there's one thing like about I've noticed that when I go to Catholic church, I get to know the people more. Like I went to a Protestant mega church, and I recognize faces every day when I go out because everywhere in my county, but I don't know anyone's names. But the Catholic one, if I see when I see someone in my parents out in public, we're shaking hands. You know, like the guy the Walmart greeter today, like just an hour ago, was one of the guys who was in my church.
Nice.
So it's just like, oh hey, I'm Caleb. And he got his name, and we shook hands, talked for a little bit. He went, "Why didn't you do your mass this morning?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Do you have a good answer?
No. We stayed up too late last night in the group in the voice chat. And I overslept. That's my excuse. Not a great
Pitiful.
one.
Pitiful.
I know it's awful, but no, it's definitely I can't remember the point I was going to make with that one, but whatever. Back to the whole point about being in a Protestant country or Protestant town. Like I told Jamie this the other week where I said being a right wing young Catholic and like anywhere everyone disagrees with you,
Right.
No matter where I go, when I'm getting disagreement from even with the Christian friends, I'm getting disagreement on the Catholic stuff, and with the secular friends, getting disagreement on the political stuff. So it's it really encourages you to know your shit. Know your shit.
Yeah.
I mean, at least I do. At least I know a guy who doesn't care to know any of it. He goes, I don't care what they say. I'm just gonna do it anyway. I'm like, okay, but I can't do that. I have to know everything to defend it.
Right.
And it is I don't know. I'm the kind of guy who enjoys it at least. I mean, if I can go to a party, it's been an hour talking about religion.
Right.
I have fun. People have told me I've ruined the party because I end up arguing with everybody today. I'm like, we want to argue. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah, well, and that depends on how intelligent the friends at the party are. If you can see it as a conversation or an argument, because those are my kind of parties. I love whenever I can sit at the table and there's somebody who disagrees with me completely, and we can talk and get that figured out. That's one thing I do like about the friends that I've kind of cultured here are we do have our disagreements, and we can separate into, okay, everybody who doesn't want to be part of that conversation goes in the other room. Everybody who does in this room, and it's good fun, because the ultimate idea is that now if you're arguing with people who have no interest at all in doing what is right, then there's not even a conversation that's worth having there. Yeah. But if you have, say, a Protestant, an Orthodox, and a Catholic in a room, and I'm, at a party with these people, or I have a men's group that meets, and it's one hardcore Protestant, one hardcore Orthodox, me and a guy in RCIA, we have great conversations because we're all gunning for the same thing, which is to be closer to Christ and to find the ultimate truth. And that helps you grow every single time, no matter who you've got around you.
I'm actually shocked you have Orthodox in Mississippi. We don't have any in Florida. There's one Orthodox church in the entire county, and it's in a trailer. I think like 8 people goes there. So I think no Orthodox people in Florida, in Central Florida at least. I'm surprised they got some in Mississippi.
We've got 2. We've got 2 in, or at least in Jackson area. I know there's another one up in Starkville where Mississippi State is, or Columbus, somewhere around there. But there's Greek. It's Greek Orthodox, and there's another one that's Orthodox of America. I think that's it's like the Russian sect, but it's the American version. I don't know my Orthodox history.
Those distinctions are hard to follow for me.
Yeah, but their priest at the Greek one, they look exactly like you want an Orthodox priest to look like. 0 social skills, long gray beard. I mean, it's perfect.
Awesome. I wish there were Orthodox people here, because the only Orthodox people I encounter are the Twitter ones, and I'm sure there are good ones on Twitter. I just haven't found them. I would love to find a good Orthodox guy to have on. The only one I know who's like a good one is King Pillard, Matt Erickson. I talked to that guy for hours about anything. That guy's incredible.
The kicker too is, if you're Orthodox in Mississippi, Protestants aren't necessarily arguing with you because they don't have a clue what you are or what it is, and they're like, that what they honestly think, they're like, oh, you're just another Catholic.
Yeah. I want to try to look it up on YouTube and try to find like Protestant Orthodox debates. I can find like maybe 4. There's not a lot of them.
That's because the Orthodox are smart enough not to get in these debates. They're just that's one thing I love about the Orthodox. They're just like, it's true, take it or leave it. I don't care. Get out of my face.
Yeah. So do you have do you do a lot of apologetics out like parties and stuff, or is it kind of something you kind of do online? Do you do a lot of like in-person apologetics? So
No, the podcast started because partly too because I was doing it in person. It's something I did in college. I did it a lot in college because we talked about this a little bit the last time I was on, but I got kicked out of Protestant school for being Catholic. And then because of that, it's like, okay, I'm different than everybody else. Why am I different? Why are they so threatened by me? What are the answers? So then I started studying it more and more. This was like when I was in 5th grade, and found a good group, found a good youth ministers that they're deacons now. And then I transferred schools over to another school where my best friend there, he was a huge Baptist, and he would drill me every day and be like, "Why do you believe this? Why do you believe this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I got to go figure that out." Side note, he's an RCIA now because he's smart and looks for the truth. But anyway, so I had to learn a lot about my faith before I even got confirmed. So by 17 years old, I was running retreats and doing talks there at those retreats here in Mississippi. Whenever I got to college, I did a lot of speaking, ran some Bible studies, stuff like that. And then whenever I got married and moved to Denver to go to a master's program at the University of Denver. And there I was, that's where I started teaching apologetics regularly to people at St. Thomas More Parish up in Centennial. And a lot of gray-headed people in that class, which was cool to see for me. And then also new Catholics or Catholics who had gotten all the sacraments, but they just didn't really know what their faith was. So they came to that too. And I just started doing that regularly every single year. I tried to do it during Lent. I think I'm doing it during the summer this year. But I try to teach my local parishes, especially here, because this diocese always seems to be stuck at Catholic 101. I thought that was going to change with our most recent bishop. The previous bishops, 2 bishops ago, Bishop Houck, his kind of was that he was going to build up the church in Mississippi, and that's what he did. He had to make sure all the finances stayed correct and everything ran smoothly. And he did a pretty good job of expanding, but it wasn't sustainable. So then Bishop Latino was the next bishop who came in, and his whole job was to be the bad guy and shut down churches that didn't need to stay open, like a little parish that had 4 people in it, where there's another parish 20 minutes away. So he had to do the bad guy, which kind of put a damper on everybody. And then the latest bishop came in, and he did spark some good things that came through here and pushed people a little closer to getting past that Catholic level 1. But that's one thing that I try to really push is, hey, can we get the people that are definitely living here and staying here all their lives to know a little more about their faith, so that whenever a Protestant says, well, why do you do that? They have a decent answer for them.
That was my church would do something like that, but most of them are, 70 and older. And so they don't really care to talk to anybody,
Yeah. And that's good too. You got your community. You don't have to worry about it. You just show up. Yeah.
The goal is to get to that point where I can just go, I don't care anymore. But it's like I said, the one in the town over from me in Lakeland, they got a lot of young people, which is nice. I keep getting told I need to go to that one to find a girl, but now I gotta go, so I don't have to drive to Lakeland anymore.
Now you don't have to move your parish.
That's right. I can stay with the old people who are nice and give you free books. So my second time walking out, I went to mass once. Everyone found out I was new. Second time I walked out was like 2 books and a rosary.
Nice.
It was awesome. Great people.
Now, are you a convert or are you a revert?
Convert.
Okay. What did you come from?
Pentecostal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Pentecostal megachurch.
So how did you make your leap?
I found Bishop Barron videos on YouTube.
Okay.
Read those, watched a lot of those. I mean, I'm a very argumentative fella, and so I would be in my like youth groups arguing with everybody about like, well, why can't we do this? Why about this? Why does this not make sense?
Mm.
And so I realized my best friend became an atheist at like 15, and so I looked around to argue him back into it, and so I realized Catholics aren't right about everything, but when they're right, they're really good about being right, and so I just kind of defer to them. I deferred to them on everything for like a year and a half. I realized, I'm deferring them on everything. Maybe I should just, look more into it to actually convert. Read a book by what's his name, Trent Horn. What We Believe by Trent Horn. And I said, I'm gonna listen to this audiobook, and if I can disagree with by end of it, if I can disagree with anything rationally, I won't convert. And I disagreed with every single chapter. By the end of every chapter, he'd beat me.
Yeah.
Like just every chapter, he just paid all my objections. Just walked me through and beat me every time. Of course, I didn't know what to do with it, but then I heard my pastor give a really, really like awful sermon. I saw it. Well, at the time when I saw it was an awful sermon. Looking back, I was wrong and he was right. But young guy ego and all that. Argued with my family for a while, and then started going to St. Thomas Aquinas Sabato.
Nice.
That's been
so. How old were you when you went through RCA?
22 or 23. It was like
Gotcha.
It's like a year and a half. It was like a year or 2 years ago. I started going in January, so I think it's 2 years ago.
Okay. Wow. So you're still a fresh Catholic.
Very fresh.
Okay.
I have to be reminded when Lent is every year. What the feast days are.
What's the latest thing that you went, I didn't know we believed that? Like the most recent thing that kind of took you by surprise.
Most recent thing. I think it probably has to do with. I can't think of a good one. Can't think of what it was. It was it involved Revelations, and it was involving after Revelations coming back to Earth, getting your body back. Really like this. The church is teaching on like now we allow cremation. How we used not to allow cremations. Really the kind of the attitude towards death and the body and soul being one, not being separate things. I kind of picked up on that through hylomorphism, that we are a body and a soul. Body and soul are not just a body and the soul is separate, which is something a lot of Protestants, like the body sins, the soul never sins. I'm like, well, then why seek forgiveness? Because when you die, your soul is just going to be clean.
Right.
Why? I remember I asked one of the guys at my church that one time. I went back to Mother's Day, and he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, the soul never gets dirty." He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Then why seek forgiveness for anything?"
Right.
Your body sins. Okay, I can do whatever I want, and my soul's still fine. And he's like, "Well, it doesn't work like that." I'm like, "Well, why?" And that's most of the answers I hear with Protestants down here. Is that, well, it's not like that. I'm like, but why is it not like that? And they have no answer to that. Why?
Yeah. That's one thing. I remember I was probably 15 or so, and my youth minister came and said, "Heaven is not the final destination." And that just blew my mind. I was like, "What is?" And he's like, "Well, there's the new heavens and the new earth." And I was like, "Wow, how do we know this?" "Well, it's in the Bible." "Oh yeah, that thing. Let me go read that." So that was my last Revelations was my last gasp attempt to keep my siblings Catholic, because we would read through that. I remember reading through that, and I was trying to like explain things to them, and they were fascinated. But then it didn't work. But still,
it is. Revelations is an odd one because so many Protestants read it with a newspaper. That's Pete Quinones' line, which is like probably my favorite thing he's ever said. Is they read Revelations with a newspaper or Twitter next to him.
Yeah.
But I mean, like what was it? I think it was Jimmy Akin. He talked about how the mark of the beast 666. That they were, if you look back at like Roman times, they were associated numbers with letters, and 666 added up equaled out to spell Nero, and so 666 refers to Nero and people who worship Nero. It has nothing to do with nothing to do with modern day stuff.
Yeah.
And like that's interesting. A lot of you talk to the Protestants, and they kind of just go, "Well, I've been avoiding number 666 for years."
Yeah.
And it's just like it's.
That's one of those things too, where it does not matter at all if you get it or even read it for your salvation. That one thing. So our Pius the Pig in the podcast is coming back this week. And this week we're going with the precepts of the church. Basically, how do you be Catholic? How do you call yourself a practicing Catholic? And it's 6 things, and they're not hard. And that's all you have to really do is go to confession once a year, get the Eucharist once a year. I won't spoil the rest of them, but those are very simple things that you can easily, do, and then just live your life. Live your life geared towards the Eucharist, but it's not rocket science. And it just it takes a lot of relying and trust in the church fathers and the Christians that have come before us, and it's still, not to say it's bad. Don't get me wrong, it is a very good thing to read your Bible. That is the best way to pray, is to pray with your Bible. But it's not everything.
Yeah, I know. I love the Bible. I love the Bible so much that when I found out Catholics had 6 more books, I converted.
Like, sweet, more reading.
Oh yeah. No,
actually, for you, it's more, hey, I could buy 6 more books and put them on my bookshelf.
Exactly. No, I have when I was first, my first became Catholic, there was like a 6 months window when I was just an absolute like dick about things. What I look back on, like I said, I've done a lot of those things, but I remember I was debating a Protestant one time, and we both had our Bibles in front of us, and I slid my Bible next to his and goes, "Huh, mine's bigger than yours." Which is, there's so many little things that was Protestants that, I have a lot of Protestant friends. All my family's Protestant on both sides. Love my Protestant brothers and sisters and all that stuff. But there's this little things that are, I put this. You should have seen the reaction my family had when I went to their church for like Mother's Day or something, and they did communion that day, and I had to take the bowl of all the stuff in and just pass it and not take one.
Yeah, they hate that.
Yeah, that was a weird like argument that came out. It was like, "Was my church not good enough for you?" And I'm like, "No." And
I just had this conversation with I can't remember who I had it with. Maybe it was, I can't remember, but we were talking about it. And it is what they call it communion. They call it the Lord's Supper, but it's also called communion in their churches. And the thing is, we're not in communion with them.
Yeah.
And it's just another way, of, how the wokesters and the progressives, they try to make you bend the knee. That's just a way for you to bend the knee to the Protestant church. And it's something we can't do. It goes against our religion. We cannot take communion in a church that is not Catholic.
Now, there's so many. It's so many little things, like when I walked in, I instinctively just tried to genuflect before I sat down, there's just little things that kind of are noticeably, how I put this, when you're just talking to someone, they can't tell, but there's so many little things you do in a church that are just, they notice that, and it kind of just reconfirms the point that we're not on agreement on things, and that can be somewhat frustrating and awkward. Like my girl invited me to go to Hood Church on Sunday, and I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
he's Protestant. I'm not going to. I think they have a woman pastor, so I'm definitely not going. Yeah, and so it's just it's I don't know, there's just so many little things that you don't I can't think of a way to say it, but it's like so many little things you do being Catholic that is reconfirm that line that's distinct between you and a Protestant, and sometimes Protestants don't like that. My mind is remembrance of the difference.
Yeah, well, they get upset too if when they come into a Catholic church and they're told, hey, you cannot take communion. Yeah. That's you see it most at weddings is, hey, if you're not Catholic, you can stay in your seat, cross your arms like this.
Yeah.
And it's seen as such a slight against them. It's like, well, what do you mean? We're all Christians. What are you doing? But it really is completely out of love for them, because he or she who eats and drinks in vain eats and drinks judgment upon themselves. That's I don't know the chapter and verse. That's in the Bible.
Something.
Yeah, but it's but that's one thing is, and that's just a extension to the culture at large is, hey, if we say no, this is wrong, and we're going to keep you from doing it, people get very upset. One's because you're telling them it's wrong, but also because, hey, why are you not letting me do it? And it's one of those things where we're not forcing you to not do it because we're trying to be mean.
Yeah.
But if you're about to jump off a cliff and jump over the guardrail that we already put up there, we put the guardrail there because there's a cliff on the other side, and we decide instead we're going to tackle you to the ground and not let you jump over that cliff, we're not being aggressive. We're not being mean. We are trying to save you from ultimate
Shout out
death.
to the libertarians.
Well, and that's one thing too. You and I both came out of the libertarian mindset.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. One reason I started really digging into the apologetics is because one, I cannot really do much with politics, mainly because my wife said, I don't want you to run for any political office. I was going to go be mayor of my hometown, and she said no. But there's better ways to support, moving the culture forward.
Mm-hmm.
My way is by teaching in the parishes. The people who showed up to my apologetics courses, a lot of my friends, and a lot of my friends are also the same people who pushed through the Dobbs case. I got to go to an after party with the people who organized the Dobbs case going through. We had a Roe No Mo party, and we celebrated those people who are directly responsible for ending Roe v. Wade in America. So they're doing incredible stuff. That's not my skill set. That's not what I'm called to do. That's what they're called to do. What can I do? Well, they don't have time to dig into, why are we supposed to go to mass on every Sunday? They don't have time to do that. They want to know that kind of stuff, but that's where my skill set comes in. I've gone through all the questions. I've gone through all the answers. People have been trying to stump me for years, and they can't, because every time they do stump me, I go, I don't know. I'll go figure it out, because I know there are smarter people than me that have already figured it out.
That's one of my favorite things about being Catholic, is that if I don't know, I can easily find the answer.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a Protestant, if I didn't know, I'd ask my pastor or youth pastor, and the answers I got were, I'll get back to you next week, and they never did, or we don't ask those kind of questions.
Right.
Instead of those who want to know, it's very frustrating. I know some very, very smart guys who would ask questions and be told Christians don't ask those questions, and then stopped asking questions entirely about religion. And I didn't know anything about it. And it's very upsetting and frustrating to see a organized structure like a Protestant church sometimes just like shut down or discourage intellectual pursuits of anything.
Which is not, it's not completely wrong on its face, because they come from that Catholic tradition where it's trust the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. But we don't ask those questions, and the church fathers have figured it out already. Don't worry about it. Those are two different answers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's dude, I've been reading more of the church fathers, and just incredible. I mean,
yeah, because when you dig into them, you realize, they had the same problems we have. They do the same things we did. They're exactly like us. Yeah. And that's one thing I don't understand. Like my brother-in-law, he is a Calvinist. I know he's well read. He's got 6 kids under the age of 8. So he's living a very Catholic life. But that being said, 6 kids, you don't have as much time to read as you used to. Whenever all of his kids are grown, maybe he and I will be able to read and talk a little more. But his whole, when he goes back to the church fathers, it's very pick and choose what he's reading. It's very clear. If you see, there was a letter by I think his name started with a J.
Jerome?
No, it was way before then. This was in the 200s. Is like Justin or something like that.
Justin, there's like several Justins.
Maybe it was Justin Martyr. Okay. I think it might have been him. Man, I'm sure I'm butchering that, but go back into the catalog of the Pius the Pick and podcast. I talked about this before, but one of the emperors said, "Hey, what are all these Christians, and what is their deal? What do they do as Christians?" And he said, "Well, the main thing that everything goes around is this man named Jesus Christ. He died for us on the cross, and he came back to life 3 days later. And the most important thing he left us was what we call the Eucharist, which is the bread and wine is brought to the minister, and the minister there transforms it into the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And it's very point blank. This is, hey, in the early 3rd or 4th century, this is what Christians were doing. This was the central part of their life, was the Eucharist. It was the true presence, the body and blood. And he made it clear then as this is not a symbol, this is not a representation. This is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity. So that's one thing. If you really start digging into the church fathers, you've got to get to Catholicism, or at least orthodoxy, one of the two. But for him, he's going back to, who is he reading? He's reading Luther. He's reading Calvin. He's reading the church fathers to his church, the Protestant church, which it is odd sometimes when you start pulling these threads apart of considering Protestants Christian the same way that Catholics are, because the Islamists, they have Christian roots too. They are a Christian heresy as well. That's something that, but we look at it as a completely different religion. So yeah. I guess because they still have Jesus and they stripped away rather than added, like the Mormons or anybody like that, we can look at it and go, okay, the Protestants are looking at, I like to picture a beautiful magnolia tree, and they're looking at one of these leaves. And if you've ever seen a magnolia leaf, they're giant, they're beautiful. You can see the detail that's been put into the leaf, and they're just at awe by this leaf. And then there's another sect of Protestants that are looking at a different leaf, and they're like, this is the most beautiful leaf. This is all that is true and good and beautiful. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you're a Catholic sitting there looking at the whole tree, and you're like, guys, take a few steps back. Look at it. This thing is incredible. This mighty magnolia tree is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Look at the flowers. Look at the life that is springing up in it. But they are so focused in on that leaf that they go, you're absolutely insane. There's no way to know anything that's greater than this.
Yeah. Now, it is something that's I've talked to the partisans around here that I talk to. I'll bring up Martin Luther, and they go, "You mean Martin Luther King?" And I'm like, no, the one who was named after he was named after this guy, Martin Luther. And then you start going into like what Martin Luther did, and they're like, oh, he banged a nun. They just are very like I wish there were a few very intelligent Protestants around here that I'd love to talk to. There's not a lot of them, and so it is a. I think it was Peter Creek who said there's two ways to God. There's the external and the internal. External being like the first move, cosmological arguments, like the first way, the ways by Aquinas, that kind of stuff. Then there's the internal, which is more like Augustine and like Pascal, like demonstrating like the beauty of the church or the that kind of stuff. But like nowadays, I think there's like a third option for that. I think for some reason seems to be more effective with a lot of like modern Protestants, specifically the engineering types, is just like how effective and efficient the church is.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, I argued with a Protestant the other day. He was saying that prayer to the saints might be true, but it's no longer necessary because you can just text someone asking them to pray for you.
Yeah,
it's like the efficiency arguments people make nowadays is very odd, but I don't like it because I think you argue the confessor is much more efficient than talking in your room to God.
Yeah,
which to God directly.
If that, in their mindset, that is the right thing to do, because once saved, always saved. Why would you need prayers after death if you're once saved, always saved? So it makes sense. That's the good thing, is that it does, they're starting from a level 1,400 years out of saying, okay, here's our starting line. At least they're logically consistent for their line.
Yeah. It's, yeah, there was this is the point Jeremy made that I don't. It's something he said. We talked about it. I want him recently. I've been thinking about it a lot since then. I kind of agree, and I kind of don't. He said you can't be a Protestant pastor and be intellectually honest. And it's tricky because on one hand, they claim to favor. A lot of them say their favorite book's the Bible, but they kind of ignore or don't talk about where it came from.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I think that's true, a lot of them are either willfully ignoring history or hiding the history from the congregation. But I think there are intellectually honest Protestants, because I know several who are intellectually honest about their views. I think he's right about pastors. I don't think he's right about generic, like, regular Protestants. I think there are a lot of very well-read, intelligent Protestants that are really fun to talk to, in person, not online. Online conversation with any differing religion is just never fun.
Right. Well, and it's because if you're just run-of-the-mill Protestant, and you are well-read, yeah, you know a lot of stuff. Like, every time I do talk to my brother-in-law, we have very fruitful conversations. We both grow deeper into our faith.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is because we're both learning our faith still, and we probably will for the rest of our lives, and that's a good thing. But again, he has 6 kids. His job is not centered around finding the absolute truth. He, like me, relies on his church fathers, being Calvin, to say, okay, I trust this guy and know that he's got it figured out. Let me just assume he's correct and then go from there. If you're a Protestant pastor and you're going through, what do they call their seminaries? Do they just call them seminaries? What do they call them?
Bible college, normally.
Bible colleges. And you go through Bible college and you get your degree in Protestant theology. Then, okay, there was a lot of, you dedicated 4 years of your life trying to find the truth. And at some point you do have to make a disconnect, which is, in my mind, okay as well, because you're still relying on faith, and that's the Catholic Church as well. You're relying on faith. But there's some things that you really have to take the leap of faith on, where if you're not going to match it up and you're not going to become Catholic, or at least go get you some sacraments, say, hey, I still want to reject authority, but I want to get the sacraments, and go to Orthodoxy. But by that point, at least for most Protestants I know that have converted, they go, well, I looked at Orthodoxy, and yes, it seems like it has a lot of truth to it, but if I'm going to go all the way, I got to go all the way.
Yeah.
So
I would say one of the biggest leaps of faith is just accepting the fact that they were correctly removing 6 books, but not really knowing why.
Yeah,
that seems to be that's my main point I bring up as Protestants nowadays. I pinpoint on one issue and say, okay, I don't want to talk about anything else. Mary, saints, we can talk about it later. You know the Bible, I love the Bible. Why were these 6 books removed? I pinpoint on that and talk about that one. It seems to be effective so far.
Which is such a silly thing to have your faith hinge upon, and it's so easy for us, because the thing for those 6 books, they're gorgeous, they're beautiful books. My favorite books are the Maccabees. Well, Wisdom probably really is my favorite book, and the Maccabees. I love the Maccabees, but again, it does not matter to the ultimate course of salvation on whether or not you have read those 6 books.
Yeah.
But it is something that matters to Protestants. The Bible is the ultimate authority. So now you've questioned their ultimate authority, and now they're questioning their ultimate authority. That's going to hurt. That's going to break a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you get whenever they finally do get across, they get hung up on the most random things of, well, I don't know if I can get behind purgatory. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about that. Come on. Okay, well, I do believe that Mary's the greatest human of all time, but I don't know about saying that many Hail Marys in a rosary. Like, okay, that's fine. Again, rosary's not important to your salvation. It is a great tool that will help you get there, but let's just get the basics down. Then you can get the rest of it figured out later. Because even me today as a Catholic, I'm like, I don't know if I agree with this teaching. This teaching is a difficult one for me to come across. But I know I'm not the smartest man that's ever lived, and I'm not God, and I'm not the Pope, and I'm not a prophet. So I'm going to rely on the church fathers and the hierarchy to not be lying to me when it comes to moral faith and morals. Yeah,
humbling yourself to submit to those who have done more and know more is a very important thing in Catholicism. I really appreciate it. I think that's something I think a problem with serving is that kind of humbling and submitting yourself to those who know more. I'm not to say there's those who know more, but those who came before and figured it out and no more. Okay, I can I don't know why we fast on Fridays. I have no clue. I still try to fast on Fridays, and I think eventually I'll look into it and figure it out. But I don't need to know why we fast on Fridays to fast on Fridays.
Yeah,
just know. Okay,
you do it. The bishops tell me that's what I'm supposed to do. And the other thing too is it really is, and it is it is not something that's going to come natural. It is something that is by the grace of God that we have because we've accepted the sacraments, we've accepted His church, and we've been infused with the grace in our confirmation to have that obedience to our bishops. Because if you look across the map and look at all of our bishops in the world, they are not the best. They never have been the best.
Yeah.
Even, whenever it started, there were 12 bishops. One of them had Jesus murdered on the cross. So for 30 pieces of silver, not a huge price. There was money exchange. There was bribery. There was betrayal. There was doing the opposite of loving Christ. So there was only 11 out of the 12 bishops were any good. And today, there's only 11 bishops out of the 100 and 200, however many bishops there are in the world. There's probably only 11 that are really good still as well. So, that's one thing we do. It is humbling to have to find that humility to say, I submit to my bishop and I don't like it, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's we're running up on time, so I've probably one or two more questions. What's the most common objection you hear nowadays coming against Catholicism from a Protestant?
From Protestants?
Yeah.
It's always Mary. Mary is the one that they get hung up on, which I really have not figured out why that's such a stumbling block for them.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from just being told all their lives, okay, no, Mary had brothers. Mary had other sons. Mary was not a virgin forever. Mary sinned. It's these things that they've been told all their life, which in the Bible, which they, always go to, they go, well, it says right here that Mary had had sons. And, it's just not. It is such a lazy argument.
Even John Calvin said you can't prove, and you can't prove that verse does not prove either way.
Right. So, because if you go back to the Greek it was written in, you're like, it's not.
Adelphi. Yeah, Adelphi was meant any male relative. I think it was used in the Old Testament for Lot and his nephew or something.
Yeah, which they understand because they look at the Old Testament books and they say the same things. Okay, here's what the scriptures, there wasn't a word for this. They use this word, they die. I don't know why that's always the hang up, but it's just something they've been told all their lives.
Yeah. I've always preferred the explanation that Joseph was older than Mary. And that's why I can't remember who it was, but the historical theory was Joseph was older than Mary by a lot. He was on his first wife died. Mary was a second wife kind of thing. He took a vow of virginity, so he took her in for safety and protection. And he had other sons, and he died, and Mary was a stepmom to other kids. So Jesus had step siblings,
which very well could be true too. Again, that's always one thing. It frustrates me is does not matter. It's okay. It could be cousins. It could be step siblings. Whatever you want to make it. It does matter on whether or not you're going to honor the Mother of God. She is she is human. One of the reasons we talk to her so much is that she understands the human experience as a human being. She was the greatest among us. Jesus is God. He was fully human. He was fully God. Mary had the point to say no. She could have said no. She could have been disobedient. Jesus could have too, but it would have gone against his divine nature to say no to God, whereas Mary did not come divine. It was in her human nature to say, no, I do not want to follow, God and what he's calling me to do. So that's why we put her on such a pedestal. But that is the biggest hang up is Mary as the Mother of God. Now, once they start getting everything else, that one falls into place. Like one of my buddies who's going through RCIA, he said, I still have not gotten over the Mary thing, but I found everything else to be true. Kind of like you were saying, everything else is true. So I'll figure it out later. I'm just going to, go on with it. So that's always the biggest objection that I always hear is Mary. And I'm sure this season we're going to do a big Marian episode.
Awesome. Yeah. Down here, it's either Mary or purgatory. A lot of people down here are held up on purgatory. Which I don't know why. I find it to be odd that that's the one they picked. Like, has a hang up.
Yeah.
But it's
purgatory, it hangs up some of the Protestants I've talked to too, but it's one of those things of, okay, if you don't understand that salvation is not always guaranteed, it's not once saved, always saved, it's real easy for them once they get the sacraments in mind to go, oh, that's why purgatory exists.
Yeah. I've always just used like I think it's like Revelations something 36, where it's nothing unclean into the heaven of God, nothing unclean into the kingdom of God. And so I kind of use it as like, okay, well, if you sin, then you are, dirty, unclean, and you have to be clean to get into heaven. So there's a cleaning process, and we just call that purgatory.
Yeah, it's not as frightening as they think too. And once they figure out, oh, it's not like being tortured or even it's not just being bored. And
a lot of them think it's like a third destination. Like, you go to hell, you go to purgatory, you go to heaven.
No, it's
and I'm like,
more
it's
of a
limbo.
process.
Like, they think of purgatory as limbo. And
right.
And I'm like, that's not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was at Archbishop FL&P who said there are hundreds of people who hate what they think the church to be, but you won't find 2 people who actually hate what the church is, or something like that. It's I'm paraphrasing and butchering it.
Yeah, I think it was like thousands of people in the world hate the church for what they believe it to be, but less than 100 actually hate the church for what it is.
Yeah, great quote. FL&P and someone I think more people need to. Who was that? Someone said it's FL&P the Catholic Billy Graham. And I'm like, he's better. I think he was over.
Oh,
he was there first, but he's. Every time I watch a FL&P clip on YouTube, I'm like, this guy's incredible.
Without Bishop Fulton Sheen, we would not have Father Mike Schmitz. So he paved the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anyone listening, FL&P had a homily on what the Mass is, and he has this great line where he's talking like little kids up front. He's like, he says, and some of you probably ask your mom to watch a football game, and she doesn't get it at all because there's no anything about football. And you can play about coming to Mass, and I don't know what's going on. I get nothing out of it. Like, well, because you bring nothing to it. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's he had so many. Like, Americans have their I have my problem with like American intellectuals and American Catholics, but they're very pithy. Americans are great. Like, we are great at being pithy people, and so we have a lot of great quotes and not a lot of great thinkers. But we got some great quotes.
I think the American church will be something that causes a force for the church at large. There's a reason that God picked the specific time and place to bring, discover the Americas and then bring Christianity to it. And it's going to be through the Americas too, not just the United States, but Canada and Mexico and Brazil and Argentina and South America. It's all going to, be a beautiful, beautiful thing. I was talking to, I don't know what his username is. I just know him as at Italian. He put all the maps, the maps of different dioceses and demographics and stuff and beautiful churches on Twitter. And I was talking to him, and I was lamenting the fact that our churches are just boxes. And he reminded me, it was like, well, Italy had thousands of years, 1,500 years to build up these beautiful cathedrals, and raise the wealth and capital to build them and have the skilled labor to do it. America's had 200 years to actually start building these churches. It's a miracle that we have the amount of churches that we do today, looking at the way they do. So I was like, you know what? You're right. The world's not ending tomorrow. It's probably not ending in the next year or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or even 10,000, maybe. Who knows how long? God's going to keep this thing rolling. It's going to be great. And we just got to be content and at peace with the fact, hey, we're building something that we won't even see the end of our creation of what we're building upon. What we do build will ultimately be destroyed for something even better in the future. So we just got to appreciate what God's calling us to do right now and get to work.
Absolutely. And that is a great note to end it on. Colby, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Colby Mitchell 34. And please listen to our podcast, The Pious, the Pig, and the Podcast. That is going to be starting season 2 this week. You'll find it wherever you find your podcast. It's The Pious, the Pig, and the Podcast. Just to learn a little bit about the Catholic faith. If you're a Catholic right now and want to dive deeper and to really take it seriously and to have a few laughs along the way, come on. If you're Catholic curious, it's also a great place to start as well. We field questions too, so just reach out to me and I'll be happy to take your request.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Again, guys, this is Osteotomism. Like, subscribe, share, all the YouTube stuff. Website is currently down. It will hopefully be up by the end of the month.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah, I forgot to renew the yearly subscription. And so it's all just completely down. It's a hassle. I spent like an hour. I had to call tech support and talk to some Indian dude for like an hour. It was, I can't. But yeah, so hopefully it'll be up soon. A lot of great podcasts coming out, more live readings, more Zach Mariton, Eric Von Kadudin. We got a lot of great stuff. You don't want to miss it. But yeah, have a good night.